Frayne, you're manager at the CITB in London, which is the Construction Industry Training Board, and you're here today to talk about skills shortages. Can you please tell me what your job role entails?
Well, actually, so I manage a team of 8, what we call customer engagement advisors. To all intents and purposes, they are account managers, so they work with registered employers who are in scope and what we call CITB levy liable. So they pay a CITB levy, which funds our 3 core aims of our business, which is qualifications and standards, careers, and training and development. Our primary aim is to work with the employers to support them to upskill and attract people into the industry and retain people in the industry. So we really support them along those lines, really, but a big focus on working with colleges, training providers, universities, what we also call prescribed organisations. So they used to be known as the Federation, so there's 14 in total. Some examples include sort of Federation of Master Builders, Seeker. What they do is that they have a membership body, and then they obviously work very closely with us to sort of steer the sort of delivery and provision of what we do.
Okay. We're told that the industry needs 217,000 people to ease the shortages. Tell me, is the construction industry in crisis?
The plural of data is an anecdote, but anecdotally from my experience, there are skill shortages, and mainly one of the traditional problems of the past sort of 20, 30 years in London is a lot of the labour is from outside of London, whether that's across Europe or whether it's outside of the M25 and in England, Wales, Scotland to come to work there. But also as well, it's getting that contact with those employers to make them aware of what funding and grants are available to help support their training needs. So, it's challenging. I wouldn't call it a crisis. I mean, the material shortage is a bit of a crisis, but actually the order books are quite healthy. And, if we look back at during the pandemic and then towards the end of the first lockdown, actually the number of staff retained was significantly more than what was expected and modelled. So challenging, yes. Crisis, probably not at the moment, but obviously if we don't do anything about it, if we stand still, then yes, it will be a crisis.
Are employers taking up the opportunity of training staff?
They do. There are some employers that won't want to engage because it's not worth their while, or we don't provide the relevant services for them, or perhaps they perhaps dabble in a little bit of building, but actually their main work is what we class as out of scope. So things like engineering, gas, plumbing, electrical, they're not actually within scope, and they're not classed under us as an industry training board. So there's a number of complexities there. I think ultimately the key thing for us is broadening what we fund that's in scope, and also making that process easier. Where we're starting to improve things is actually we've previously perhaps done what we think is right as an organisation rather than listening to what the employers and the stakeholders are telling us. But there's been a lot of work going on over the past sort of 6 to 9 months and trying to make grants and funding more accessible, and that work will start to bear fruit soon. So I think they do. We need to try and get that balance right between keeping things safe and in line with legislation and statutory obligations, but also making it easy enough for them to access.
We're hearing, for example, that Waits feel that they're going to introduce flexible working for their staff. Do you think this is something that we'll see introduced across the entire industry?
I'm going to stay on the fence, but I think it'll depend on, I think 2 key things. Number one is what the client wants and needs, and ultimately what works for the business. Now, obviously, if you're looking at the increase in technology, automation, then yes, I think there's going to be a place for that, but obviously it will be on a case-by-case basis. I suppose it will depend on the organisation, but definitely, if we want to attract more women into construction, or people with family or care and responsibilities, then there will need to be that, but ultimately that will need to be balanced against the business needs and what the client needs. But definitely, I think it'd be mad not to look at something different, really.
That could, of course, be a potential problem because, according to the CITB's own research, most people regard the construction industry as having a muddy boots image. How are you going to overcome this?
Well, I think the key thing now is the onus is on us to work very closely with various stakeholders, so the colleges, the schools, various private training providers, and the various prescribed organisations, really to change that perception. Because yes, don't get me wrong, there will always be a muddy boots image, but actually with the range of sort of, I suppose, level 4 technical apprenticeship routes, the degree apprenticeship routes, and and various degrees with, I suppose, sandwich placements in there. Actually, there's a really rewarding career, which would be open to all, but also as well will really reap rewards. So, if you look at your civil engineering, your quantity surveying, they're just two trades off the top of my head that are very technical, highly sort of sought after. There's a lot of potential for off-site work as well, which isn't as muddy, but you won't be walking through a muddy site and actually be in a clean environment, building and working on that. So me and my team will have to work really hard to, I suppose, spread that word and make sure more people are aware of it, because obviously we've not been successful enough, if that's the perception.
Okay, well, according to Construction Manager, the industry is going to be facing another major challenge in the next few years, and that's how is it going to meet government carbon targets? Bearing in mind that we do have, according to Construction Manager, we're going to need 350,000 new people. The CITB geared up to help this?
Yes, I think the interesting thing, and one of the challenges we will have is, as I mentioned earlier on, there's an issue around scope, what we can get involved in and what is in scope for us and classed as inverted commas construction, and what would set out the scope as maybe an engineering area. But what we're doing at the moment is not only just in a local level in London, but nationally, is we're coordinating ourselves and working very closely with various other stakeholders and getting involved with LEPs and local authorities to really, I suppose, get together and actually sit around the same table, rather than what perhaps we've been guilty of in the past, is maybe being a little bit siloed and doing our own little thing. We can have those direct discussions with government, with the civil service, to take on the ministers to support that. There are certain things we can't support, but at the same time, the things we can support, we'll throw all our energy into that and support them. We just have to do it, not just for an industry perspective, but the wildfires across the world and floods and everything, there's a need, we can't not act. So, that is what it is. We just got to get on with it, roll our sleeves up and get dirty, so to speak.
Anthony, that's incredibly positive. So finally, what would your message be to a young person who wants to join this industry?
Well, it's a career for everybody. I think that's the key, is ultimately there's a career for everybody. So whether you're academic or you're more hands-on or vocational, there is a stable career for everybody. We have a site that's launching soon called Talent View, and also as well our Go Construct sites. There's plenty of information, plenty of case studies. Dip in, have a look, and by all means get in touch with your local colleges, because we can come in and help there as well, and try and support with work experience as well. So that would be my advice.
Anthony Frayne, manager of the CITB in London, thank you for your time, thank you for your advice, and thank you for your views on the skills shortage.
Brilliant, thank you.